My name is Greg Weisman. I'm the supervising producer of The Spectacular Spider-Man. I grew up reading Spider-Man comics. I'm not quite old enough to have been reading it when they very first came out, but I was a huge fan since before I can remember.
My name is Victor Cook, supervising director. I grew up with Spider-Man. Grew up with the comics and the original animated series in the 60s.
For me, Spider-Man's really every man. He's the figure that represents the reader, one of the true archetypal superheroes.
Yeah!
Before he became Spider-Man, he was really just that wallflower. He wasn't the jock, he wasn't the standout, he wasn't the popular guy. He was really just your regular teenager that this accident just happened to. When he becomes Spider-Man, it's such a joy and a release. And because he's wearing a mask, he is freed up to have this other, more outgoing personality, something I think we all want to do.
So, you'll rob the piggy bank, but won't touch the cookie jar. Wow. You must qualify for Nephew of the Year. Twisted division.
The Stan Lee, Steve Ditko, Johnny Romita era of Spider-Man. I've been a big fan of that.
I'm constantly rereading those old Lee Ditko and Lee Romita issues over and over again as we produce the series. We're trying to be very true to all the characters, not just Peter and Spider-Man, but also all the villains and all the supporting cast, and really find the core truth in each character and try and bring that to the surface.
Look, Beaky, I admire anyone who dresses up as their favorite animal. Better still, you can fly.
Writing for Spider-Man, the icon, is incredibly intimidating. We know that we're going to be under a lot of scrutiny, that we've got a new young audience who certainly knows about Spider-Man. I mean, Spider-Man is such a part of our culture, but may not know all the old stories and certainly doesn't per se have an allegiance to all the old stories. But we're also very consciously writing for geeky fanboys like me.
Sorry, pal, no eating in the subway.
We as a crew on The Spectacular Spider-Man really wanted to give fans of the classic Spider-Man something that they can respond to, but we also wanted to contemporize them and bring them to a whole new audience.
Yes! Webhead 1, gravity 0.
The guiding principle for creating any character on this show is to try and read the original comics and think down to what is the core kernel of truth about this character relative to all the other characters, to find things about the character that are essential to who he or she is. And so what we try to do is just really keep to the spirit of the character. We'll change some details here and there. Spider-Man was created in the 60s, and 98% of the cast was Caucasian, and that's not New York in 2008. So we've changed the ethnicity of some of the characters very consciously, but we are also conscious of trying to maintain the spirit of each character. Try really to be true to everyone from Dr. Octopus to the Green Goblin to Spider-Man himself to Mary Jane Watson, Gwen Stacy, Aunt May, Jonah Jameson, Coach Smith. All of the characters were from the comic book. My goal is to not create any original characters, believe it or not, because the comic book itself has such a rich, large cast. So whether it's Ashley Kafka of the Ravencroft Institute or Mr. Warren, the high school biology teacher, we're taking these characters right from the comic.
The tricks don't work on the Sandman, but do sand tricks work on the Spider-Man?
Oh, this can't be good.
We are starting everything from scratch, but a lot of our stories come right out of the comic books. We won't necessarily be telling them all in the exact same order, and we're condensing his continuity a bit so that we can introduce some characters earlier that weren't introduced until later in the comics. But there are stories that we're lifting right out of the early comic books, particularly, again, the Lee Ditko and the Lee Romita years.
I've made a terrible mistake.
Sounds a little corny to say this, but, you know, working on Spider-Man, you feel like with great power comes great responsibility.
You heard the one about great power coming with great responsibility?
Because there's so many people who have a definite idea of who Spider-Man is and how he should move and what the story should be like. And everybody has their favorite era of Spider-Man, whether it be the 60s decade or the 70s decade or currently, as well as the past animated shows.
Oh, yikes! Can you say halitosis?
I can't draw anything at all, and I'm very dependent on Vic to create the look of the show.
When deciding on the animated style for The Spectacular Spider-Man, what was really important was that it be very animatable. And what I mean by that is because Spider-Man's movements are so unique and so fast that it had to be something that could be done easily by animators in a timely fashion and still look good. So we had to make it simple, yet not look too simple. So we wanted something flexible with a lot of squash and stretch.
The one thing I emphasized to Vic Cook is that this has got to be a Spider-Man that moves.
Action is a big part of Spider-Man, and that's one of the most fun parts of storyboarding on this show, because really it's a free-handed choreography. There's a big Hong Kong flair to what we want to bring to it, to make it as over the top as possible, because that's what Spider-Man is, and to bring a lot of speed and motion to it. We also wanted something very, very unique. That's why we brought in Sean Galloway. He's got a style that you really can't say it looks like any other style. It was simple, elegant, looked very animatable, and also very appealing.
My name is Sean Galloway. I'm the lead character designer here on Spectacular Spider-Man, and my job entitles me to design the look of the show. The difference between this Spider-Man and the past designs that we've seen on TV is that we're trying to give a more modern feel, a little bit of funk to it.
Still have to get me some hands-free. What? Nothing. Bro, just trying to do too much at once.
It's very fun collaborating with the designers and other artists in the crew. Sean Galloway is our character designer, but I'm also very hands-on with Sean, because when you're coming up with a character design, it's not always just about a cool drawing. When you're designing a character, it's the same as casting a live-action person for a live-action film. You're casting a part, so the character design has to fit that.
We didn't want to emulate all the musculature in a comic book, because all those lines are incredibly difficult to animate.
I get these fantastic drawings and designs from designers, and sometimes the changes have to be made to fit the character that we are casting in that episode.
Our goal for this series is either ridiculously naive or ridiculously ambitious, or both, which is that we want this to be the Spider-Man series, the one that 20 years from now, people are gonna look back and go, wow, that was Spider-Man.
Something smells bad.
Oh, still? I washed this costume 5 times.
We're hoping to create a Spider-Man that will be a classic. That this will be a show that'll be remembered 20 years from now as the ultimate Spider-Man show.
Something that's both incredibly contemporary but incredibly iconic and classic.